Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. In each week, we enjoy exploring the history of the city of Mississauga with you, so please send in your questions, your curiosities, things that you've wondered about and pondered about, things that have puzzled you, and you're interested in learning more about, or even stories you'd like to share with others. Please send them in to us, and we look forward to exploring the history of the city of Mississauga with you. Hi David, thank you for your question here on Ask a Historian, and one that has long intrigued me and fascinated me as well is the gravestone at St. Peter's Anglican Church and Cemetery at Arundel, honoring a Napoleonic general who served in battles and emblazoned with his coat of arms and knighthood, something quite unique in the city of Mississauga. And you're asking, Adamson Street in Arundel Village is indeed named for the same individual, and that is Brevet Major General Sir Peter Adamson. Now, how's that for a handle in life as well? Peter was born in 1779 in Dundee, Scotland, and he entered the military early in his career. In 1800, he served with, he entered the military as an ensign in 1800. By 1808, he attained the rank of captain. By 1814, a major. In 1816, a colonel. And then in 1817, he was gazetted a brevet major general. What brevet means is that he attained the rank of major general, but the pay of a colonel, a sense of battlefield promotion, if you will. He was loaned to the Portuguese army during the Napoleonic Wars, what were then referred to as the Peninsular Wars, and he served in numerous battles, leading what was known as the Hunters Battalion, and he was awarded for his service and bravery 7 gold medals and a Distinguished Order service as well as receiving the Order of Knight and Tower of the Sword, which was the highest honor in Portugal. That is the KTS, Knight of the Tower and Sword, that appears on his gravestone, and that was for his service at the Battle of Salamanca, where he was wounded. For his official rank, if you will, as recognized, was that of colonel, and he retained that rank upon his retirement. Later, in 1848, he was gazetted a brigadier general, and that's a rank that he attained, even though he was retired at that point, retained until his death in 1865. General Adamson first came to Canada in 1817, and part of his arrival in Canada was around securing his compensation for service during the Napoleonic Wars. He returned in 1819, having selected an acreage in which he would build a permanent house for himself. What happened at the end of the Napoleonic Wars was that the British government found itself relatively bankrupt, and rather than keep officers on salary, they would pay them off with either half pay, or they could sell their commissions and receive land in lieu of pay. And that's what Peter did. He received land. He received in excess of 20,000 acres of land in regards to his rank. The higher the rank, the more land you got. And there were pieces here and there. It was scattered throughout the significant portion of land up near Norval, Ontario, and Georgetown, which is why if you go to Norval today, you'll find Adamson Street in Norval, and that is named for the same individual. However, it was acreage here in historic Mississauga. Specifically, the acreage was on the south side of Dundas Street, between roughly Air Mills Parkway and Winston Churchill today, a 400-acre farm which he dubbed Toronto House, or Thorn Lodge, which is where Thorn Lodge Drive takes its name from. And so he came in 1819 to select his property where he built his house. He commissioned a house to be built for him, and then he returned in 1821 to reside permanently in Canada. Again, he chose this property for reasons unexplained to reside as a permanent home for the majority of the rest of his life. He did reside in the Norval area for a short period of time as well. Again, Thorn Lodge Drive remembers the name of Thorn Lodge, his home in historic Mississauga. Incidentally, he was not the only Adamson to come. His younger brother Joseph was our first medical doctor. Many people connect to the stories of Joseph Adamson, and those that carry the Adamson surname today in historic Mississauga and surrounding area are all descended from the doctor, the general's brother. The general only had one daughter as his only child. So General Adamson, in addition to his military duties, he was involved with the organization of the Provisional Battalion of the Militia here in Upper Canada, what is now Ontario. But he was also a member of the Legislative Council of Upper Canada, where he earned the title Honourable, also being referred to in records as the Colonel or the General. So quite a significant, really the mover and shaker in historic Mississauga in this area in terms of connecting to the stories of people who settled here and those that helped shape our community. Really is a giant in historical circles in Mississauga. And again, his gravestone, which you refer to, not only lists his knighthood, the Knight of the Tower and Sword, which was a Portuguese honor, but also the battles in which he served, and his family coat of arms emblazoned with the motto, "Touch not the cat, but with a glove." And that is the story in brief of Brevet Major General, the Honorable Sir Peter Adamson. Thank you. Thank you, Gary, for the question regarding the stone ruins or the stone wall along 9th Line north of Britannia Road. And yeah, I do know the property well, and had visited the property before. It was a state of ruins. The wall that you refer to, or the remnant walls, are the remains of a foundation of a large barn that once stood on that property. It was only demolished a few years ago. So to delve kind of into the history of the property, is it belonged to the Noonan family, and the Noonan barn, specifically the Noonan farm, if you will. William Noonan, the ancestor in the family, emigrated to Canada from the Genesee Valley area of Pennsylvania in the late 1780s. William's son, also named William, and William is a recurring family name in the early years of this family. William's son, William, purchased a lot here along 9th Line from Daniel Highland in 1854, although some suggestion is that the Noonans were there for some time before they actually purchased the lot. And this is at the northwest corner of Britannia Road and 9th Line, in an area that was already home to several Irish Catholic families. The area was dubbed by some as Noonan's Corners, being the Noonans were a prominent farm on the corner of what is 9th Line and Britannia Road. And a descendant of the Noonan family remained on the property right up until the early 2000s. The original Noonan house, which was a log cabin, was actually lost to fire in 1935 and replaced by another house, which remained again into the early 2000s. The stone wall ruins that you refer to are from the Noonan barn, and the barn itself was likely built about 1865, although there's some uncertainty. It's sometimes difficult to try and date a utilitarian structure like a barn, but this was the lower course of the foundation and lowest level of the barn. It was a wooden superstructure above the stone foundations. The barn was demolished not that long ago. We have pictures of the barn, which we'll show here, leaving again only the foundation walls. And the Noonan family, for several generations, operated a mixed farm here, including cattle, which is what the barn was. The purpose of the barn in the bottom course where the stone was housing their cattle. The surrounding community became known informally as the Catholic Swamp, and a focal point of the Catholic Swamp was St. Peter's Roman Catholic Mission Church, which survives today along 9th Line, just south of the former Noonan property. The Crossroads community, which locals in the early 1850s came to call Diamond, also was home to a weaver shop, a blacksmith shop, a school, and in time a general store that became known as California. So you talk about dream. We've got diamonds in California, the Catholic Swamp, Noonan's Corners, a place with many names, and again it became known as Noonan's Corners after the Noonan family, and that's the foundations you see left today from the Noonan barn. So thank you for the question. Thank you, Dave, for the question, and a fascinating one to ponder and delve into. And I must admit, in researching for the answer for this question, I learned some things myself as well. And sheer number of crossings that have taken place over the Credit River on Lakeshore Road is a fascinating thing to delve into. And generally, the crossings have all been at the same location. So you think about walking in the footsteps of history. Think about it just in terms of how many times, or kind of how many generations of people have crossed the Credit River. Almost in this exact location. So the first reference we have to an organized crossing of the Credit River in Port Credit was in 1805. Undoubtedly, there were earlier crossings than that. People would have had to find a way to cross the river earlier than this, but in 1805 we have reference to a ferry operated by the government impropriator Thomas Ingersoll. The ferry was a flat scow. It was 23 feet long and 8 feet wide, and was propelled by a pole and rope system across the Credit River. After Thomas's death in 1812, the ferry was operated by his son Charles and his son-in-law Daniel Pickett. The ferry operated until the summer of 1820, when the first bridge across the river was built. So in terms of, we have a ferry, and then finally in 1820 we have a bridge, but it was the first of many built crossings or built bridges across the Credit River. The first bridge was of log construction, and it lasted a mere 12 years. It was replaced, the log started to rot out, and it was replaced by a sawn wooden lumber bridge that was built by Chisholm and Gamble Company of Oakville, and that opened in 1832, and it lasted until 1850, when it was washed away in a spring flood in April of 1850. On April 15th of 1850, Toronto Township granted funds for what they called a temporary bridge. While awaiting a new permanent bridge, the enterprising Robert Cotton of Port Credit operated a ferry system across the river, much like Thomas Ingersoll had done years before. The new temporary bridge was built in partnership between Henry Rutledge and Robert Cotton, and it was ready for usage in October of 1850. The following year, in the spring of 1851, a new permanent bridge, what was really two bridges, because there was a smaller stream crossing and then the main channel of the Credit River. So the two bridges were completed in the spring of 1850, and they were in turn washed out on September 17th of 1895 during a large storm, and both these bridges were destroyed in that storm. A new iron bridge was built in late 1895 by the Peterborough Bridge and Engineering Company, and this was a short-lived bridge. We don't have many pictures of it. It only remained in use until 1919, when Lakeshore Road was repaved and widened. The iron bridge was only a one-lane bridge. The new bridge was planned to be a two-lane bridge. When the new bridge was constructed, a temporary floating Bailey Bridge was used just to the north of the bridge location, and the Bailey Bridge, there's a picture of it temporarily in place, deflecting the traffic along Lakeshore Road while the new concrete bridge was built. The new permanent bridge was completed in 1919. It was a high-arched, reinforced concrete bowstring bridge. This bridge remained in use until 1959, when widening of Lakeshore Road again necessitated its replacement. The concrete arch bridge was closed on August 24th of 1959. The bridge was reportedly broken into two very large pieces and transported by barge to about 5 miles out into Lake Ontario and sunk. So yes, indeed, somewhere in the depths of Lake Ontario off of Port Credit lie the remains of the concrete arch bridge. A new 4-lane bridge was opened in 1960, and this is the bridge that we use today to cross the Credit River on Lakeshore Road, like countless others have done before. It's just a fascinating part of walking in the footsteps of history. Just think about the times how we just drive across the Credit River Bridge, but think of all the bridges before then, all the crossings that have taken place. People have interacted with this landscape for generations upon generations, and it's a fascinating way in which history peeks through. So thank you for the question. Wrapping up Ask a Historian this week, we go back to a question we had a few weeks ago from Susan of the Mississauga Writers Guild, asking us what is the most unusual fact about Mississauga. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, we broadcast that out and we had a number of responses. So we're going to share some of those responses again this week with the story. You know, asking people what is the first thing that comes into their mind when we say what is the most unusual thing about Mississauga. From Elizabeth, the exiled Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna Romanov, the last living Grand Duchess of Russia, lived quietly in Cooksville along Camilla Road for a few of her final years. Just a fascinating story, the last Grand Duchess of Russia here in Mississauga. From Kyle, the thing that comes to mind is in a way a bit of an identity crisis. The sheer number of names that Mississauga has been known as, whether Township of Toronto or Toronto Township, which of course resulted in a great deal of confusion for years and years when the town of York became the city of Toronto in 1834. So the tale of two Torontos side by side for a number of years. But also the municipal predecessors by name. As many as 6 different names go into the formal names, incorporated names, go into the makeup of what is the city of Mississauga today, including Toronto Township, Town of Mississauga, Streetsville, Port Credit, Toronto Gore, and portions of Trafalgar Township, all combining, at least in part, to make up what is today the city of Mississauga. From Richard, along the same lines, and just a fascinating way of looking at the origins of Mississauga, the formation of Mississauga. According to Richard, the one thing that strikes me as being unique about Mississauga as compared to other cities is that Mississauga has grown from a number of historic centers amalgamated together. Most cities, like Ottawa, Toronto, and Hamilton, have one historic core, which the growing city radiated out over in the decades that followed its early development. In these cities, you can easily define that historic central core. In Mississauga, by comparison, Cooksville, Port Credit, Clarkson, Malton, Streetsville, and others, they all have their historic cores, each village having grown outwards until meeting up with its expanding neighbors. Richard likens it's a fantastic metaphor, I think, Richard, and thank you for this, but it's like throwing 5 or 6 stones into the water and watching the ripples radiate out from each, eventually to merge with the other ripples, forming one big ripple. And that is what makes Mississauga very unique, according to Richard. From Dorothy, a unique fact. How many mayors of cities have had heart transplants and have had the donor commemorated with a park? Our first mayor, Mayor Robert Speck of the town of Mississauga, who had a heart transplant with a heart donated by 15-year-old Richard Wolsnowich, I think is the way you say that, after whom Richard's Memorial Park is named down on Lakeshore Road. And last one for this week from Terry. The most unusual fact about Mississauga is the existence of the Meadowvale Miniature Village, created entirely by a resident in his own backyard in historic Meadowvale Village. People who discover it continue to be astounded, and just an amazing sight if you have a chance to visit Meadowvale Miniature Village. Truly unique, a truly fascinating part of our city's story, and just what some resident has lovingly created, or an individual resident has lovingly created of his own toil, his own love of history in his own backyard to commemorate the history of the place in which he lived, grew up, and fondly remembers. Meadowvale Miniature Village, well worth a visit if you have a chance to do so. Thanks.